Everyone, it's Miss McCaffrey here. So we're going to talk about thematic statements, how to write them, how to figure them out, and then some practice. So what is a theme? Well, first off, you might hear your teacher refer to it as a theme statement, or a thematic statement. And they're always going to be the central message of a literary work. But also think literary work, it's not necessarily just a book. It could be a short story, it could be a poem, it could even be a movie, really. And this idea, it's something that the author wants to convey about whatever the subject is. And it's always going to be expressed as a sentence or a general statement about life or human nature. So it's important to remember that a literary work can have more than one theme, and most of those themes aren't directly stated, but they're implied. So we as the reader have to think about the elements of that work, and we have to use those to make inferences or guesses as to what themes are being implied. So we have to do a lot of the work to figure out what the author believes about whatever subject that they're imparting to us. So we have thematic topics versus theme. So a theme is always going to be a universal statement. It can be applied to multiple things. A theme is never going to be one or a few words. So that would be like a thematic topic or a thematic subject. So those are always going to be those abstract ideas like courage, survival, war, love, or a two-word one would be like cultural collision, the immigrant experience, things like that. And those topics are what we use as the foundation for thematic statements. So how do we figure out a theme? Well, we come up with a list of these ideas that are in whatever work we're looking at. So things that the piece of work is really about. So again, we have those abstract words. Those are the thematic topics. So alienation, prejudice, ambition, freedom, love, loyalty, passion, those kinds of things. So our next step would be to combine those abstract ideas with what we think the author believes about them. So what is the author saying about that abstract idea? And remember, they're not saying it specifically necessarily. Sometimes we'll get lucky and the author spells it out pretty plainly for us, but sometimes we really have to just do the thinking work ourselves. So maybe they're saying something about the qualities of humans, or they're making commentary on society. That's for us to figure out. So how do we know what an author believes about a topic? How can we figure out how they feel about it, the ways that they're implying it? So we want to look at what the major things happening in the story are. So what's the primary conflict? Is it internal? Is it external? How is that conflict resolved? Is it resolved? Character changes. So how might a character be from the beginning to the end? What's the nature of that change if they do change? And to help you do that, you might come up with maybe 3 or 4 specific events and really provide context for yourself. This might not be something you put on paper, just think about it in your head. So why are these events major events? So here's an example. So Jim's whole outlook changes when he realizes that the residents of Maycomb are incredibly racist. This is really, really specific to To Kill a Mockingbird, right? We can take that, right? That is pinpointed on To Kill a Mockingbird, but we want to go universal. So if we take the magnifying glass and we move it out and away, and we look at the whole world, an individual's worldview radically changes once he is exposed to injustice in his community. So this one can apply to maybe many different works. Whereas if we're talking about gems specifically, I don't know a lot of books that have gems in them, but I don't know, maybe. So here's what a thematic statement or theme statement is going to look like. It follows kind of a formula. So it's the abstract topic, so that noun, and then the author's belief about it, and then some kind of qualifying clause, so extra information. So for that To Kill a Mockingbird example, an individual's worldview, in this instance, the worldview is the topic. It radically changes. And notice that's just 2 words. It doesn't have to be really long. But then that qualifying clause is really the meat of the statement. once he's exposed to injustices in his community. So it almost answers a question. So when does an individual's worldview radically change? Oh, once he's exposed to injustice in his community. So you need that extra bit to really to keep it broad still, but to give us more information. So we're going to write a thematic statement for the movie Up. There are going to be spoilers. This movie's been out for like 11 years, so if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry. You should watch it, even if you get spoilers. Okay, so I'm going to think about the thematic topics that are present in this text because I'm thinking of this movie as a text. So I know there's love, right? Because we have that relationship between our main characters, and it's really sad, and you weep in the first few minutes of the movie. Friendship, courage, family, adventure, grief, old age, right? We know grief happens whenever his wife dies. So here, remember, we're going to think about the major things that happen. And I'm going to pick just one to think about. So here's my list. So Up, I have love, friendship, adventure, courage, family, old age, grief. So I picked grief. So I'm thinking, what does the author believe about grief? Well, the author believes that grief can make an individual want to isolate themselves, but creating new friendships and confronting sadness can allow the person to start healing. So notice that the first thing I wrote down is not what I went with. So what you write down initially you're not married to that. You don't have to stick with it. So you can workshop it and make it make more sense. So I picked grief because I know that our main character, he wants to isolate himself away from people. But we do know that when he makes new friendships and he starts confronting the sadness that he feels about the loss of his wife, he begins to start healing and being open to those new relationships and trying to find a new happiness. And I think those ideas can be applied to lots of other things. So there's one thing that I have to take away to make this an actual thematic statement. And it's that little phrase, the author believes that, because that's my thinking tool. I'm going to write that down to just remind myself that I need to think of what the author is believing about grief. But now that I've taken that away, if I capitalize the G, I've got a thematic statement. Grief can make an individual want to isolate themselves, but creating new friendships and confronting sadness can allow the person to start healing. So if we put it in our fun little color-coded statement formula, my abstract topic is grief, and then it can make an individual want to isolate themselves. And really, I could stop there if I wanted, but I don't want to. I want to give more. I want to give what happens when they don't do that, or what can get them out of that. And that's that qualifying clause there. So there we have it. We have a thematic statement. So big takeaways here. There is no one right answer, especially when you have a longer text like a movie or a novel, sometimes even a short story. There are multiple thematic topics at play. So you may come up with 5 different subjects, and they might be different subjects than your neighbor or someone that's in your class or even your teacher, and that's okay. Themes are never just one word. So you would never want to say, the author believes that grief, because that is useless. What did they believe about grief? That's your job to tell us. And it's all built around us as the reader figuring out what the author believes. So I hope this has been helpful. And if you still have more questions, ask your teacher. Bye.